Hi everyone, I'm Hope Parrish, your VP in charge of programs for the Culver City Historical Society. And I'd like to thank you all for coming tonight and joining us to celebrate the 75th anniversary of the making of The Wizard of Oz and The Wizard of Oz itself. It was Jerry who mentioned a while back from the Historical Society that to my father, Dennis, who co-chairs with me this program, and believe me, I couldn't do it without my father. But Jerry suggested that we meet Aljean Harmetz for the 75th celebration of The Wizard of Oz. And when we met with her, I was in New Orleans still, my father met with her and he said, "You're going to love her." And I have to say that I did. I instantly fell in love with this lady, and she is colorful and honest and just everything you want a writer to be. She's written amazing books on the making of Casablanca, Gone with the Wind. She has a couple other titles that are over there that I didn't know anything about her. She is also, one of the things that impressed me the most, she's written 40 pre-obituaries for actors before they pass away, and then they come in and fine-tune it. And her last two was Mickey Rooney and Shirley Temple. So I have to say, we have a celebrity in our room. So without any more coming out of me, let me have Aljean come up and share with you. Is this where you want it to be?
Yeah, I will need this with the lights there.
You'll need it in a minute.
Oh, okay. I may need it in a minute. Well, I'm really I think.
Do you prefer this?
No. I'm really delighted to be here. I have a history with Culver City, even though it's my daughter, her husband, and their two children who live in Culver City. I sort of grew up outside the gates of MGM, where my mother worked for 20 years in the wardrobe department. And I wanted to be a movie star at that point. And really, I actually wanted to write an Academy Award-winning movie in which I would star. Well, life does a lot of things to all of us. And I got the writer part, but unfortunately, I was a pretty bad actress. My own journey down the yellow brick road began in 1973, more than 35 years after The Wizard of Oz. Yes, I may need the light. Was made. I had written 100 magazine articles starting the year I graduated from Stanford, writing for photoplay and modern screen. And I've never been embarrassed by that, because it was a great learn as you earn few years that I wrote from them. But I had written articles for everything from Photoplay and Cosmopolitan to the New Republic and the New York Times, but I had never written a book before, and I soon found out that I didn't know how to write a book. And the way I found out was when my disappointed editor returned my 2 sample chapters with a demand for details, texture, more details, and more depth. Well, I spent the next 2 days sitting in a chair in my living room and staring at the ceiling. But after that, I started over. My first try had just skimmed the surface, but When I started over, I began to see my task was really archaeology, an exploration of the rubble that remained of the world that had been created at MGM in 1938 and 1939, when the MGM lion was king of the Hollywood jungle. And by 1973, the yellow brick road was a jumble of broken and missing bricks. Judy Garland and the cowardly lion, Bert Lahr, were dead. And so were director Victor Fleming, two of the three principal screenwriters, and assistant producer Arthur Freed, who had made Oz the forerunner of the new kind of movie musical that he would produce during the 1940s and 1950s, movies that included Singing in the Rain, Gigi, and American in Paris. But on Oz, he was just an assistant to the producer, Mervyn LeRoy, but he was a very valuable assistant. He had started as a screenwriter, and it was Arthur Freed who got L.B. Mayer, who ran the studio, to put Over the Rainbow back in the movie after a number of producers had told Mayer to take it out because no MGM star should sing in a barnyard. Oz had 10 screenwriters, some of whom only lasted a day, and one who stayed with the movie almost off and on for several months. And I spent weeks sitting in the very, very dusty and very, very freezing basement of the Thalberg building, going through every screenplay from the first draft of the first writer on the movie to the final shooting script. And following the false starts, the clever ideas, the discarded scenes, one of which would have cost $250,000, an enormous amount in 1939, included Munchkins doing a ballet in the air. The subtitle of my book was Movie Magic and Studio Power in the Prime of MGM and the Miracle of Production 1060, The Making of the Wizard of Oz. By 1973, though, studio power was fast disappearing. In October 1938, when the actors first stepped on the huge sound stages at Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, almost all movies were products to be sold in their metal cans like peaches or string beans. They were sent to theaters owned by the studios that made them, and they had a shelf life of 3 to 4 weeks, not 7 decades. And The Wizard of Oz was simply one of 41 movies that MGM released in 1939, and there is a bucket full of the other movies. The studio always said that it made one movie a week, but it actually never quite reached that quota. The best it did was one movie every 9 days. Because The Wizard of Oz cost $2,777,000 and children only paid 15 or 20 cents to see the movie, it was just moderately successful at the box office. And to my surprise, most of the critics weren't impressed. It seems odd to us today because I would say this movie and Gone with the Wind are the two iconic movies that have lasted throughout the entire sound era. But I discovered a fascinating thing as I researched my book. Here is the part of 2 reviews by 2 major critics in 1939. In the New Yorker, Russell Maloney said that he had, quote, sat cringing before MGM's Technicolor production, which displays no trace of imagination, good taste, or ingenuity. Otis Ferguson, who was probably the most respected movie critic at that time, said that the picture, quote, has dwarfs, music, Technicolor, freak characters, and Judy Garland. It can't be expected to have a sense of humor as well, and as for the light touch of fantasy, it weighs like a pound of fruitcake soaking wet. Well, the 1939 reviews rarely mentioned Margaret Hamilton, except perhaps to say there was a wicked witch played by. Yet when the movie went on television in 1956, the Wicked Witch became the focal point of reviews, and the reviews were glowing tributes to the movie. Why? What changed? Well, something had. The reviews were written by men and women who had seen the movie as children, and now grown up were still a bit afraid of the witch who had haunted their nightmares. Margaret told me that when she talked before groups of adults, someone would always ask her to do the witch's laugh for them, and she said there would be an audible intake of breath and a pause before the applause started. She said it was as though some of the fear that they had felt as children still remained. We tend to think that what we see on the screen is what was intended by the writer or the director or the studio from the very beginning. But most movies, like life outside the movies, are full of accidents. The Wizard of Oz was no exception. Some of the accidents took place on the sets and were nearly fatal, and you'll hear more about those in the documentary that follows my speech. Others were less literal and more fortunate. L.B. Mayer, who ran MGM, didn't want Judy Garland to play Dorothy. He wanted Shirley Temple, the #1 box office star of 1935, 1936, and 1937. And producer Mervyn LeRoy wanted Gail Sondergaard to play a glamorous Wicked Witch. Sondergaard had won the first Academy Award given for supporting actress for her role in LeRoy's 1936 movie, Anthony Adverse. Luckily, 20th Century Fox refused to loan Shirley Temple to MGM, and LeRoy was talked out of having a slinky witch in sequence. Much the same kind of lucky accident happened on Casablanca, another movie that I've written about. That movie's producer, Hal Wallace, offered the part of Ilsa Lund to Michelle Morgan, but Michelle Morgan wanted $55,000. Wallace could borrow Ingrid Bergman from David O. Selznick for $25,000, and he did. On Oz, I was the beneficiary of some of those accidents. By 1973, MGM was the property of its major stockholder, Kirk Kerkorian, whose game plan was to gut the studio to raise money to build an MGM Grand Hotel in Las Vegas. Everything that could be sold was sold, including the huge Lot 2, where Andy Hardy Street and the Philadelphia Story Mansion and the Chinese village from the Good Earth had stood. And Lot 5, which was full of buggies and stagecoaches and landaus. And Lot 3, where the menagerie of 24 animals lived. When I was 12 years old, I worked for a summer in the fan mail department of MGM. And I used to board the tram to Lot 2 every day, and I would eat my lunch. It was full of outdoor sets. There were no indoor sets on Lot 2. And I would pick a different set on which to have my lunch, which was usually cottage cheese and carrots, since I was a fat child. Anyway, every day was a different, and it was magical. It was really magical. At an 18-day auction in May of 1970, MGM had gotten rid of all the costumes, props, furniture, and even the plants from decades of movies. I bought a few fake swords from Ben-Hur and 2 one-gallon bougainvilleas that grew and thrived in front of my house for the next 30 years. All the things that the studio thought of as inessentials: music scores, production files, screen tests, photographs, had been dumped into a pit and buried. But lucky accident for me, when the matte paintings, the parts of the set that were too expensive or difficult to build, so MGM created them with crayon pastels on black cardboard, were pulled from a warehouse and they were dumped into the middle of one of the MGM streets to wait for the truck to take them to the pit. A studio employee, and I never learned his name, with a sense of history, grabbed as many as he could fit into his car and took them to USC. And almost all the matte paintings from The Wizard of Oz were among the 36 that he saved. And at Technicolor, Tom Tarr, another man with a sense of history, used to fish out of wastebaskets the test scripts for Technicolor movies that the company threw away. And the slides that you're watching during my talk were saved by those 2 men, almost all the slides. Anthony Tringali there has put the slideshow together with some wonderful black and white photographs too. In 1976, when I was almost through writing The Making of the Wizard of Oz, I had a lucky accident of my own. Someone searching for Christmas decorations in a storage shed at MGM found a box of set stills from The Wizard of Oz. Photos of each set that were dressed with props, with furniture, before any actor set foot on them. And that box had been sitting in a closet unseen for decades. Because The Making of the Wizard of Oz was my first book, I naively expected that the people who had the most important jobs on the movie would be the keys. One of my earliest interviews with the movie's producer, Mervyn LeRoy, made me realize it was going to be much more complicated. A vague man smoking a big cigar. He had kept no records, neither on paper nor in his head. And it was from the, quote, unimportant people, men and women to whom Oz was not just another movie in a career crowded with movies, that the revelations came. When Margaret Hamilton's stunt double, Betty Danko, got out of the hospital after being thrown off her broomstick and seriously injured, She wrote an 8-page account of everything that had happened. 36 years later, I picked up the torn and yellow pages and took them to a Xerox machine down the street from the bungalow that her father had bought in 1927 and where she still lived. And that's how I got a lot of the information that you're going to see in the documentary. Two men over 80 years old, King Vidor, who directed the Kansas sequence after Victor Fleming left to direct his friend Clark Gable in Gone with the Wind, and Karl Spitz, the German immigrant who became a Hollywood dog trainer, had almost total recall. Spitz made the mistake of accepting $125 a week for his dog before he realized how desperately MGM had been looking for a Cairn Terrier. The dog was the lowest paid actor. At $500 a week, Judy Garland was next. Auntie Em and Uncle Henry got $750. Margaret Hamilton, her usual $1,000. And at the top, Jack Haley and Ray Bolger earned $3,000 a week, a magnificent salary in 1939. Margaret Hamilton was the one friend that I made on my voyage down the Yellow Brick Road. She was playing the elderly courtesan in Stephen Sondheim's A Little Night Music at the Schubert Theater in Century City at that time. And I would pick her up at midnight. Can I get this off? I would pick her up at midnight. Okay. Sorry.
You want to get out of there?
Yeah, I'm feeling a little sort of...
The cord is around me.
The cord is, yeah.
That's fine. Okay. I'd pick her up at midnight, and we would sit at my kitchen table drinking coffee until 3 a.m. Then and in the years that followed, she reminded me of a fractured fairy tale. Her clauses bumping up against each other, her sentences spinning from present to past to further past, as though her mind were a cabinet of fascinating oddments that she kept in no particular order. She was astonished that this small part in what she called, quote, a picture for children, an interesting picture and part of an innovation, and somewhat overdone in some tiny places, but very pleasant, should have made her famous. Yeah, I wanted to tell you about Margaret Hamilton. She was the kindest of witches. Uh-oh. 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 Oh-oh.
Ring around Rosie, a packet of spears. I'll have fun with you and burst your bubble and make you full of tears.
Oh, no, no!
Oh! Look what you've done! I'm melting! Melting! Oh, what a world! What a world! Who'd have thought a good little girl like you could destroy my beautiful wickedness? If you think you can keep a good witch down, you just wait until you're feet fat.
The documentary, oh. I guess I need this back. We did a lot of rehearsing yesterday, but what I didn't take into account since we weren't in this room was that this thing was going to be awfully hard to move. Anyway, the documentary that you're going to see was made for PBS, and it actually was nominated for a local Emmy. And it was used by half a dozen or more PBS stations for their pledge drive.
Thank you, Aljean. So now becomes your involvement. Now is when Aljean gets to sit up here and you ask your questions and she'll answer them to the best of her ability. So Aljean Harmetz, one more time. Actually, let's bring our whole crew up here. I'd like to acknowledge Anthony, who is a very dear friend of Aljean's, who put together the PowerPoint presentation that we saw earlier. And of course her daughter, Elizabeth Harmetz, who sang a beautiful job on the rainbow. Margaret Hamilton over there. Can't tell you his real name, I'd have to kill you. So.
I think probably the table at this point.
Okay.
Hey, Kurt, come and join me. I
Yes,
think we need to give a big hand to Kurt Raymond.
What do you want?
You have any witch questions? Are you into vampires?
Not at all.
No.
Just green toads and that type of thing.
Kurt is this on? No.
I don't think so.
No, this one isn't on. I have a loud voice though.
No, it was on.
Now it's
Now
on.
it's on.
Here, let's do this.
If you have any witch questions, Kurt is available. If you happen to be going to Knott's Berry Farm's Scary Farm, as it is, in October, you will meet Kurt again.
I play the Green Witch, who is the icon of the park. I get to fly and have fun with all my minions, but then I turn around and become the Wicked Witch of the West for Oz fans around the world. Stay, Brew, stay. Good girl.
What would you like to ask me? Who wants to be brave enough? Yes?
Why did they never make a sequel?
Well, actually they did. Return to Oz. Walter Murch, who was the film editor on Star Wars and all of the Lucas films, was given the director's job. It was considered a total failure, although there were some people who liked it a lot. I was one of them, but it was a very dark movie. And as a result, I think Disney, which had bought the rights to all of the Oz movies except for The Wizard, because that had already gone to somebody else, just never did anything for the next couple of decades. Yes?
About 10 years ago, I was working for a company over in Santa Monica. I answered the telephone, and I don't know how the subject came up, but the Wizard of Oz came up, and the person on the other end of the phone laughed. My hair was just stood out. I'm pretty sure it was this fellow. It's Margaret.
You never know, my dear. You never know.
It's hard to get a laugh like that. I'm very impressed by it.
Thank you, my dear. I appreciate that.
At TCM a while back, I saw they had a silent movie, The Wizard of Oz. Do you know anything about that?
I know that there were several versions before the 1939 movie. I think there might have been two silent movies. And actually, L. Frank Baum had a film company and made some of the Oz books into movies, and he was obviously a very good writer, and he was also a very bad businessman and ended up in bankruptcy. Somebody who hasn't, yes.
A couple of questions. One, in your researching this movie, was there anything that was a total surprise to you?
Yes. And you know that the studios put out all sorts of publicity, things which most of which in the early days were not true. Casablanca, when Warner Brothers said that Ronald Reagan and Ann Sheridan were going to star in Casablanca, they knew that they weren't going to star, but they'd starred in a couple of pictures together and audiences liked them, so what the hell, why not? You know, put out a press release that said that. Well, all of the press releases in those days were pretty much, accepted. And there was one exception on The Wizard of Oz. And the interesting thing is it was so far-fetched that it couldn't have been true, except it was. And it never got published. I told you, or the documentary told you about Victor Fleming and the apron for Auntie M. Well, for Frank Morgan, when he was playing the professor in the Kansas sequence, Victor Fleming had somebody go down to a second-hand store and buy up all the sort of rotten old, originally good but down, falling apart coats to find one to fit Frank Morgan. They wanted something that looked like it had originally been a decent coat, but it had been badly used. It was very old. So he tried them on, and the one that you see in the movie, fitted him very well, and that was the one that they used and that they filmed. And at some point during the filming, when Frank Morgan was fiddling with the coat, he discovered on the inside a little, one of the little patches that tailors would put into their clothes. And it said, made for L. Frank Baum, Chicago, Illinois. This happened to be true. It was absolutely, they brought Baum's widow, Maud Baum, to the studio. She had been doing some publicity for them too. And they showed her the coat, and it was indeed one of her husband's coats. Never published because it couldn't possibly have been true. Yes?
How long did it take to film it?
It started filming on October 12th, 1938, and it finished on March 16th, 1939. And then, of course, there was some post-production, but that was the actual filming. And the reason that I will never forget this, if you want to say why coincidences, or was I born to write this book, my younger son was born on October 12th. My older son was born on March 16th, and my daughter, whom you heard sing tonight, was born on May 15th, which happens to be L. Frank Baum's birthday now.
How many pairs of ruby slippers were there? And I've heard that the most valuable pair now have a circular scuff mark on the bottom because that indicates those are the ones where that she wore when she clicked her heels.
That I don't know. There's a lot of mythology that's grown up about them. At the time that they had the MGM auction, the thought was that there was, only the one pair for Judy Garland and then a pair for her stand-in who had bigger feet. But it turns out there were either 6 or 7 pairs, most of which were stolen by somebody who worked in the wardrobe department. Anthony, do you know when was Kent supposed to have stolen those? What year? Do you have any idea?
No,
It was it may have been when they were preparing, when the wardrobe people were preparing items for the 1970 auction. And I did borrow for the documentary the actual shoes that were auctioned off for $15,000. If people had realized that in 2013 a pair would be auctioned for, I believe, $225,000, they might have bid higher in 1970. Yes, in the back.
Wondering if you saw they did a digital restoration that they released just for a week of a 3D conversion of the film. I'm wondering if you saw it. How you
Repeat the question.
They did an absolutely
Oh.
amazing job.
The question is, they did a digital translation of...
They converted it to 3 dimensions.
Yeah, well, they showed it in 3 dimensions, not just for a week.
He's asking if you actually saw
Oh,
it.
no, I didn't see it. Yeah. No. Yeah.
I was just curious a little, because you got to be on the MGM lot and have lunch at all these different sets. I just wondered if you could share, just beyond share a little about MGM and what you saw and what your mom did in the wardrobe department.
Well, my mom started as a secretary in the wardrobe department and ended up as assistant head. Those were the days, of course, when a woman would never have been made head of the wardrobe department or any other department. Well, not true. A woman was head of the fan mail department. But my mother's main job was to do what was called a script breakdown. And that would mean that she would take the script and every version of the script, because maybe there would be 4 or 5 and things would change, and she would say what the characters should wear, what the stars should wear in every scene. And that would be whether they should be wearing negligee, would they have a bathrobe, would they have a ball gown. And with The Wizard of Oz, I think, she told me when I started interviewing her for the book that that she, I think, did about breakdowns of maybe 4 or 5 of the scripts. And the other thing about the wardrobe department, not about the wardrobe department, but MGM at that time, L.B. Mayer he considered himself benevolent, but he was a benevolent dictator. And the chicken soup in the commissary was from his mother's recipe, and I'm told it was very good. But he would not let any of his stars come into the commissary unless they were properly dressed. And he actually sent Joan Crawford home one day because he didn't consider her properly dressed. Yeah.
Speaking of the mythology surrounding, and there's considerable, because this is one of the most famous movies ever. I heard a story, and I wonder if you could confirm to me whether this is true or not. The gentleman during the Do the Jitterbug scene, who was operating the tree, was later accidentally hung on the set, and could be seen in one of the scenes in the background hanging dead.
No, it's not true. And I think that ended up being actually a wire that, or part of a camera image. Do you?
Actually, it's a bird.
A bird.
And decided
Okay.
to make the best use of getting on camera.
It was a bird.
It was a crane, actually.
We have time for one more question.
I have heard that the original storyline for the movie was sisters fighting over a pair of shoes. Have you heard that to be true? And if so, could that be the reason why there were 10 script writers for the film, and why the film did so well because it had such a simple storyline?
I think that's Wicked, isn't it?
The music. Red shoes.
Actually, in the book, they were silver shoes. They turned red in the movie because silver in early Technicolor didn't come out very well. No, the movie was always intended to follow Baum's book to a certain extent. The changes that were made, one of the most important was to make the witch the villain all the way through. It's a very episodic book. It's been decades since you've read it to your children. And the witch was just simply one episode. The deadly poppy field had nothing to do with the witch. It just was a deadly poppy field, and the characters were saved by field mice. They changed certain things from the book, but was always intended to be the story of a little girl who got blown to Oz and wanted to get home again. But the whole Kansas sequence was the invention of Noel Langley, who got credit along with Florence Ryerson and Edgar Allan Wolfe on the movie. So, thank you very much.
Thank you, Aljean. So before we do our 50-50 raffle and our book giveaway, what I wanted to do was we're trying to figure out how you, a lot of you are our members, our longtime members, but have you been noticing in the paper the advertising? Have we had the posters? Are they visible in the city where you see the posters? I'm just curious if I could get a show of hands to find out, so we know how to continue advertising and what seems to work best for us. If you saw it on our website, could someone give a show of hands if you saw it on the Historical Society website?
That's how I learned about it, on the website.
And then anyone visiting the posters that were out at like Tubbs and around town? Okay. And the Culver City paper, the Observer? Okay. All right, very good.
Oh, for the Culver patch.
Oh, and the patch, that's right. Jeannie saw it in the patch and showed it with all of us. Okay. I want to thank you all for coming tonight. I want to remind you that the archive will be open after the meeting tonight, and Julie's put a beautiful display of photographs of the Munchkins coming to Culver City and their visits, and also items from the post office with commemorative items for the Wizard of Oz. So I recommend you go over and see our wonderful display that she's put together for us.
In learning more about the Wizard of Oz, I'm from the International Wizard of Oz Club. I have information, so you can ask me any questions. I'm ready, so come up after me.
Yes, like Star Trekkers, there's the Winkies. Okay, I think I'm going to turn this over. We don't have Nicholas here tonight, do we, to pull?
No, but I can look at you.
Oh, well, come on over here. Do something with those long nails. There, I want your broom.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
She's fired. Be careful.
Yes, we will do the autographed copy from Aljean of her book, The Making of the Wizard of Oz.
Personalize it for you.
And she, if you win, go back and see her. It's on the little lip there, and she will personally autograph it with your name. Okay? We have 092048. 048 is the last three digits. Oh, I wonder if it's mine. Oh, 046, man, off by 2. No one else? 048? Going once? Oh, it is. There you go. Give it the double check and.
I'll double check.
Check it out.
50/50 raffle is $85.
50/50 raffle is 85 smackaroos, okay?
That's the blue one.
And the winner tonight is 974857. Oh, very good, we have a winner.
Oh, it's the lady. Her
Now, is there any other business that I forgot?
Her father worked on the Wiz.
Oh, you know what? Oh, we have a little extra surprise. Where's that other bucket?
I was close. Yeah.
While my dad was on his little driving trip, he found some really cute things, and we thought, well, we'll auction these off too as a bonus. It is Wizard of Oz salt and pepper shakers, and this one here is the 4 characters, and then this one here is, well, you'll be surprised when you open the box.
It's Dorothy.
Okay, oh, Dorothy, this is Dorothy. So for Dorothy, we have 092004.
On which ticket? On the base?
004, it's the last 3 digits. There we go. And for our gang of 4, we have 091989. 989. Oh, Mr. Eskridge, here we go. He can give this to his wife, who is part of my committee, and I'm part of her committee. She's a very big supporter of the Historical Society, our treasurer as well. And she's actually in the hospital right now, but she will be coming home tomorrow. So we will give this to Chuck to give to Tammy. She won even though she's not here. So if you have books, Aljean will be over to the side signing your books. If you would like to purchase a book, she will be there to sell books. And I also, again, recommend going over to the archives and seeing the display that has been put forth. Thank you again, and we hope to see you in January.